Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Education Writers Association for this webinar on what Khan Academy's founder wants you to know about online learning. I'm Lori Crouch, EWA's Assistant Director. Before we begin, let me go over some housekeeping items. If you have a question for our speakers, type them into the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. This is important. Make sure you include your name and affiliation when you ask your question. And please ask your question at any time during the webinar, and we'll get to them in the Q&A portion at the end. With that, let me introduce today's moderator, Greg Toppo, EWA President and author of The Game Believes in You, How Digital Play Can Make Our Kids Smarter. Take it away, Greg.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks for joining us, everybody. Especially thanks to Sal, one of the few people in education who needs no introduction. Sal, thanks again for joining. I know you're an incredibly busy man. You're probably the busiest man in education at this point in America. I just wanted to kind of start off by asking a little bit about sort of how things are going, for lack of a better term, in your house. Obviously we know Khan Academy is, it's more than a decade old. You've got the number I heard the other day was 100 million registered users. Is that still current?
Roughly.
Which is about twice as many young people as are enrolled in our schools. You are obviously have been working for a couple of years with the College Board on the SAT and related tests. Since this crisis began, you started producing schedules for families. You're doing daily live streams back in the walk-in closet where it all began. But I guess the thing that I was most interested in just starting out with is you're also a father of 3 young children. So I'm imagining they're at home. And I wonder if you could walk us through what a day at the Khan household looks like. Are your kids sort of trapped at Khan Academy all day? How do you manage?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually think you're right. I have 3 young children. They're 11, 8, and 5.5. I have to say that they go to a school that I helped start, Khan Lab School. It's in the same building as ours, and we'll talk more about, I guess, on the Khan Academy later.
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit about that.
A lot of what that school emphasizes all the time is student agency, being able to have students be as independent as possible, for them to be able to learn at their own time and pace, type of thing. And so the school, to their credit, the teachers and the administration there, they did a really good job. And I'm not directly involved, I'm on the board, but it was really them that did an incredible job as soon, with 2 days notice when the schools were closed. Especially the older 2 students, the 11 and the 8-year-old, their learning has been quite good. And I gotta say, I've been impressed with them even as a father. It's like, wow, you're more productive than I am during the day. They have their list, they're doing it, they're setting their goals, they're doing their check-ins with their teachers, they're getting onto the Zoom calls on their own. It's interesting now because they now are saying the same types of things. Say, hey, I gotta leave, I have a meeting to do. They go do it, and so that's nice. The 5.5-year-old has been a little bit trickier. I would say that he has been the primary source of tension in our household over the last. And it's my wife is a physician. She's a rheumatologist, so she's been able to see more of her patients remotely. She is still going in once a week to see some patients who need it, and obviously that's been a concern for us, but they're taking all of the precautions, et cetera, et cetera. My mother-in-law lives with us, and so that helps us with all of the navigation of the family, and we're all trying to work from home and all of that. But obviously she's in that age bracket where we're also worried where we have to be extra careful that we hopefully don't bring the virus home. And then my sister-in-law is also now staying in place at home with us. So we have a full house, which I think for the most part is a very positive thing for my family right now, especially with 3 young kids. So I consider myself quite lucky. And so, yeah, we're jumping in, it's a little bit, as you know, as you alluded to, Khan Academy is trying to do more in this time. Our traffic is 3x of what it typically is. We're trying to do all of these extra supports. We're trying to accelerate a lot of things that we thought we were going to do in a year or two and see if we can do it by back to school because there's a need there. But that's all happening at the same time that all the stuff at home. And then obviously the team itself. You know, we have a lot of Khan Academy team members where they don't have as many supports as I frankly have at home. They might be a single parent and they have kids home, you know, so we're just trying to be as supportive as possible as our team, understanding that parts of our team aren't going to be able to be as productive. And we're just trying to make sure that they understand that that's okay. That's not their fault, and that they just have to take care of themselves and their family first.
Yeah, and I want to talk about your team a little bit. And I guess I have a question. You know, that you brought up this idea of student agency, and I'm assuming that you're especially your older two have. I mean, would the right phrase be sort of habits of mind that that sort of work well in the transition to something like this? Talk a little bit about more, you know, if you don't mind, about your kids and sort of the kinds of I guess habits of mind that they bring to being stuck at home but having to still be in school.
Yeah, you know, connecting all of the dots, you know, Khan Academy kind of came on people's, you know, it started as a family tutoring project really in 2005 to 2004. But by 2009, I quit my day job. 2010, that's when it first came on a lot of folks' radar. We started getting press. We got our first real philanthropic funding, and we were able to build out a team and the platform. And then I wrote One World Schoolhouse in 2000. It got published in 2012, and the whole notion was like, hey, what could in a world where things like Khan Academy exist, what could schooling be like? And like the last third, I was like, imagine the school of a future that allowed, you know, peer-to-peer learning, and kids learn at their own time and pace, and learning isn't bound by time and space, and everyone is a learner and everyone is a teacher, and students are building these habits of mind that you're just talking about. And then in 2014, you know, you can write theoretically about it, but I'm a big believer of like, you learn a lot more when you actually try to apply it. And you know, there's a lesson there about, you know, book knowledge versus applied knowledge in school as well. And so we said, let's try to build a school that can put some of these into practice, and then hopefully can be a lab, a model that can help share some of these practices. So the school has always been focused on some of these ideas. And you know, even when we started the school, we said things like, you know, imagine if I'm able to take a business trip to China, I would love to bring my kids with me, and they could continue learning while they're on a business trip with dad. How incredible would that be? So the school always had a few of those principles in mind. So when you get into a crisis like this, what, you know, we're seeing, and that the teachers have done an incredible job, the administration's done an incredible job, where the kids, I'm seeing it with my children, that they you know, they obviously miss their parents, miss their friends, they miss their teachers, but they know how to structure their day. They're very self-regulated, and you know, as much as every parent would love to think that their kids are special, it seems like, you know, for the most part, all the kids at the school are doing it. So this isn't a school where there's some type of an IQ test to get in. It's not a gifted school. It's, you know, there's students all over the spectrum, but it is showing that you can build these muscles in students at a fairly young age. I mean, my daughter is 8-year-old. She's self-regulating quite well. Even in my kindergarten, my youngest son's class, he's 5.5. He's one of the younger kids out of the, I guess you could say, kindergartners, although we don't have official levels. He's, you know, we're insecure as parents because he's one of the less self-regulated of the group. We're actually turning out that the other kids are doing better than he is right now. So the school's doing a good job.
Good. You know, one of the things I wanted to kind of explore a little bit with you is the discoveries that you and the staff have made, or maybe the things you heard from the teachers in your school, about what are the things that are not replaceable by remote learning. I mean, obviously, you know, like you say, you know, being with your friends, being with your teachers. Is there something else that maybe you were surprised to find that was missing and you didn't think would be a big deal?
I would say nothing that we, I guess, surprised by. I mean, there's the obvious, you know, there's kind of the Khan Academy layer of things where you can learn asynchronously at your own time and pace. Then you need ideally you have some form of synchronicity. And obviously when school's in session, you get a lot of that synchronicity. But in this type session, there's an approximation that you can get through video conferencing, Zoom, Google Meet, Skype, whatever. And there, I think it's all the art about how you use it. So I've seen the teachers do a really great job. They do smaller sessions with smaller groups, but they do more of them. And then they do check-ins with students. And the school always had that principle where there's less, the teachers are teaching class less because students are doing more independent work, but the teachers are also spending a lot of time doing 5 to 15-minute check-ins on an individual basis with students. And I found that to be, it's very powerful when we were all in the same building, and it's very powerful whether it's on Zoom or Skype or whatever else. The stuff that's for sure you're missing is, kids can't play the same way that they play, you can't really, I mean, you can kind of play on Zoom, not really. I mean, my older child is able to do stuff, and even my middle one, but there is something just powerful about being in the room together. Sometimes the human touch, being able to hug, being able to put a hand on the shoulder. Obviously, sports, the arts are not quite the same. Our art teacher is doing a heroic job, and our the kids are stepping up, but it's still not the same as when you're all in the same room. But those are just some of the intangibles.
So one of the things that a lot of people have really kind of patted you on the back for these, and I don't mean you personally, but your organization, is this idea of when this whole crisis started, you were able to sort of step in and, for lack of a better term, sort of create schedules for people, to sort of help people manage their days. Was that the first thing that sort of people realized Khan Academy was missing for most families? Talk us through the process of how you rolled things out.
Yeah, it's. We just went through an exercise that week, the week before, and all this stuff happened way faster than we thought. We were being very forward thinking when the Monday before the school closures hit, when people weren't even talking about school closures at that point. We're like, maybe this will happen. And, we're out here in California, and California was one of the first, I believe the county I'm in, Santa Clara County, was the first in the country to have the stay-in-place order. So we were seeing it a little bit early. I mean, it turns out maybe a week earlier than everyone else. And so we started thinking about what do folks need? And we've, Khan Academy has always had two major use cases. We've always had kind of the independent learner use case, and then we've had the classroom use case.
Yeah.
And we got on the radar for a lot of folks as an independent learner use case. Hey, you need help with something, Khan Academy's there for you. Or if you're in a part of the world where you don't have access to the school, or you're even in the US, a majority schools don't offer classes like physics or calculus, and especially oftentimes not at a level that is truly indicative of what the students need. And so that was always the independent learner use case, things like our SAT practice that we do with the College Board. But over the last 10 years, we've been investing a lot more in how do we support teachers, and especially over the last 2 years, how do we support districts, where we do things like rostering and, kind of more of an enterprise tool. So that was where a lot of our focus was. As we tried to align our team of okay, who are we to these teachers? Okay, we are a strategic supplement. We are not the full curriculum, but we're an important strategic supplement where we have really good efficacy gains, even 45 minutes a week. Students are seeing gains of 20, 30% faster than expected. It allows teachers to differentiate instruction. But we've always had that lens that we want to create all of the core academic material from pre-K. We have Khan Academy Kids that goes for ages 2 through 7, and then into the, I guess you could say, the core Khan Academy that keeps going through to college. And so when the school closures happened, even though that independent learner use case, that's always been a important use case for us, but it wasn't actually our strategic focus. The classroom was and is our strategic focus. We realized that all of a sudden these two worlds merged together. That all of a sudden the classroom and the independent learner and the home learner are all the same thing. And so we said, okay, what do people need? And a lot of people, there's portals. There are people oftentimes gravitate to the portal idea that let's just create a link farm of 800 resources that could be useful. And that's not, it's something, but it's overwhelming for most folks. And so,
that was one of the first things you saw, right? Which was, you're stuck at home. Here's 10,000 things you could be doing in all these links, correct?
Exactly. Which is intimidating. And so we said we need to create structure, make it seem simple. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I was going to say that was the first thing we saw, right? Which was, everyone trying to be helpful was saying, here's all these amazing things you can do with your children. And it was basically just a list of URLs, right?
exactly. And I
And
think, for us, and I think we even erred a little bit, and actually probably have to fix it because those schedules. This was the Friday before, this was the Friday that we knew California for sure was closing, and then over that weekend it was starting to become clear that most of the country was going to close within the next 3-4 days. We said, okay, put yourself in the mind of a parent. I as a parent, like, what do I want? Okay, for different age groups, I want to understand what could a day look like. And so we started putting things together. We started circulating it amongst various people in our team, outside experts. Says, okay, this is a first shot. Let's get it out there because a lot of people are stressed about it. And then we've been refining it ever since. We've been getting more feedback that, okay, now that those are out and it looks like the school closures are protracted, can we put out learning plans that can set reasonable goals through the end of the school year and over the summer so kids can stay where they need to be. But I actually think we even erred a little bit too on those learning plans. They're still out there. The schedules they're like a full day. So you can say like, hey, you can get your math, your reading, your writing, your science, your social studies, your PE, everything. And it's not all through Khan Academy. We put other resources there as well. But what we've been saying increasingly when we talk to people, and then maybe I have to sync these two realities, is you shouldn't expect that you have to do all of that on day one or week one or even month one. If students are able to even do a little chunk of math every day, a chunk of reading every day, and a chunk of writing every day, I would feel pretty good as an educator that they're going to keep, they're not going to atrophy, and they're probably going to advance a bit.
Gotcha. I want to, we're going to have some time for questions in a few minutes, but before we do, there's something I'm really curious about, and I want to kind of scratch this itch here. In a way, talking about the flip side of what I think the conversation generally is about, school from home. We talk so much about, the crisis and the deficits and parents overwhelmed and kids not knowing which way is up. I guess one of the things, and actually you were one of the people who made me think about it when talking about mastery learning. I mean, there's got to be a case to be made that for many, maybe not many, maybe some students out there, like this is what they've always wanted. That is, I'm at home, I'm in a place that's familiar with me, to me, and I have all the time in the world to explore something that I want to explore. I can learn something that I want to learn. Whether it's more advanced math, because I work faster than the rest of my class, whether it's some history or science or what have you. It strikes me that we're in sort of this kind of golden moment for kids who can sort of teach themselves. And I wonder, your ideas about mastery learning, I think are so, I think really important. Your analogy about building a house, if you take that, I think is really kind of a good one to think about. And are we in a good place for kids to really practice mastery learning?
Yeah, I mean, what you're alluding to, and I think it's actually not kids. I think, there's aspects of this COVID life that, for a lot of us, I mean, it's been jarring for everyone that first week or two, but I think, now that we're week 7, week 8, we're like, this is still strange and suboptimal. And obviously there's all sorts of negative things happening in the world on the health side and the economy side, but there's certain aspects of it that you're like, this is kind of nice to not have to get on a plane every week. This is kind of nice to have, to be able to right after a meeting, if I have a 10 minutes of downtime, go give my kids a hug or make my bed. There are some are silver linings here, and so to your point, with I think there are students. I mean, I'm seeing this with my own kids, where they are able to go deeper in certain areas. And my wife and I have always been very conscientious about not trying to be with these kind of overscheduled, running around to 10 different practices and make sure we have time to breathe. But I think for many families in the middle class and upper middle class and affluent classes, you fall into that. You fall into those patterns where you get very scheduled, and that has some positives to it, but that has a lot of negatives to it too. And so now for everyone to have a breather, and you can see even in the kids just having a little bit more of that time to be creative, to dig deep into things that they really have a passion for, I think is great. Now, what I worry is I think it's a bit of a source of inequity. Is your and my families are going to have that. My children have tools at home. You know, my son is making films right now. My daughter is spending a lot of time inventing recipes, and you know, they're doing some cool stuff, and some of it is with their school. The school's like, hey, can you make a Rube Goldberg device, and we're going to make it so that one person's Rube Goldberg device calls a phone to call the next person's Rube Goldberg device. So it's a Rube Goldberg device that actually works in a socially distanced across the whole. So they're doing super cool stuff, but there's a lot of places where, you know, kids don't have internet access. Even if they do, there might, you know, the parent might be an essential worker and has to work, and so the kids aren't getting, maybe they're being babysat by a sibling, maybe they're getting a lot of the not productive screen time, they're just kind of watching TV all day, you know. And I say that is because I grew up in a single mother household. My mom was a cashier at a local convenience store, and I spent my summers watching TV all day. And that's, you know, I probably learned a thing or two watching Johnny Carson, but that's not, that could be a source of inequity for a lot of kids. And I don't even, you know, my circumstances were much better growing up than you know, a lot of kids today. And so I do worry about that. But yeah, I think there's something there. There's going to be some, not just kids, there's going to be adults that by virtue of having more time and space now are going to be able to do interesting things and discover some things that are positive.
And before we get away from it, if you could take us kind of very quickly through your analogy of building a house, because I think it's a really important one. Is the idea that, you know, you're the contractor that's building your foundation. You don't tolerate 80% built. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, the thing we always point out, these aren't new ideas.
Right.
Kind of, you know, mastery learning is arguably the oldest way of learning. But around 200 years ago, as society had the very utopian and positive idea, and it's transformed society, of mass free public education. And it's the reason why we have had the middle class and the success and that we've had over the last, you know, 100 years but there were some compromises. The only economic way, if you have 30 students in a room with one teacher to teach, is to cover some material and go through some lessons, you know, lecture, homework. You know, now people are better about that. There's more in-class activities and bell ringers and things like that. But it's kind of that pattern, and then you go for a week or two, and then you take an assessment. And historically, and this is actually the case in most classrooms today, let's say that the unit is on basic exponents, and we take the test. I get a 70%, you get an 80%, someone else, she gets a 95%. Even though that test has identified gaps, I didn't know 30% of the material, you didn't know 20%. Even that A student, she didn't know 5%. Even though we've identified those gaps, the whole class will then has to move over onto the next subject. And especially in a subject like math, although it's true to some degree in all subjects, it's likely going to build on those gaps. We're not going to go to a unit on negative exponents or logarithms, somehow expecting me to understand that, even though I didn't know 30% of the more foundation. And what happens is, as we go through that process, kids are accumulating these gaps, and at some point they get to, say, an algebra class, and I think algebra is actually one of the classes, because one of the first classes where all of that math knowledge up until then has to be fluent in order for you to kind of abstract to the level of algebra. And you see an equation, and that equation has an exponent in it, has a dividing decimals that you had a gap in, has the negative numbers that you had a gap in. There's no way you're going to be able to understand that with all those gaps, and then you fail. And it's not because you're not bright, it's not because your teacher isn't good, it's because there's no way for you to remediate that. And the analogy that you're referring to is, you know, imagine if we did other things in our life that way, say home building. You bring the contractor in and you say, we have 2 weeks to build the foundation, do what you can. And so they do what they can. Maybe it rains, maybe the supplies don't show up, and after 2 weeks the inspector comes. The inspector is the I can never say it, anthropomorphization of the assessment. And the inspector says, well, you know, the concrete's still wet over there, that part's not up to code, I'll give it a 70%. And you say, okay, great, that's a C minus or a D. Let's build the first floor. You build the first floor, the contractor does what they can, inspector comes in 2 or 3 weeks, that's an 80%. Great, that's a C. Let's build the second floor. While you're building the second floor, the third floor, whole structure collapses. And if your reaction is the reaction we typically have in education, we say, oh, maybe the contractor needs to be better, or maybe we need more inspection. But that that had nothing to do with it. What was really the issue was that the process was flawed. You're artificially constraining how long to do something, pretty much ensuring a variable outcome, which in school we say A, B, C, D, F. And then even though you identify those gaps, you take no time to fix those gaps and you build right on top of it. And at some point it's going to collapse. And so the whole notion of mastery learning is if someone's at an 80% level, let them keep working on it so that they get to a 90% or 100% level. And sometimes you might have to move on to the next concept, but the person should still be able to go back at some point and fill in those gaps. And there's a lot of places where that happens all the time. Piano classes. Your teacher will keep making sure you know your scales well and really master pieces before you move on. In sports, this is happening all of the time. You know, your Steph Curry or LeBron James still practice their free throws, even though arguably that's a skill that they were 80% good at, you know, probably 20 years ago. But you don't see it as much in education, and it's good reason. It's not to blame anyone, because if you're a teacher, it's impossible to do that. How do you necessarily have to have every student being able to cater to their individual gaps to be able to learn at different paces? And it's very hard if you're just a teacher with chalk and paper and pencil. But now, if you're able to blend in tools like Khan Academy, then all of a sudden you can do this type of thing where students can learn at their own time and pace, have as many shots as goal as possible, get immediate feedback, teachers can have data, understand where kids are, and fill those gaps in as necessary.
And I guess, I mean, the final question about this is sort of, do you see more of a possibility for that now that we have basically sort of broken the structure of school for the next, you know, probably several months, maybe even longer, if this continues into the fall?
I think so. I think there was a need for, you know, what we just talked about was the pre-COVID world, that kids are being, you know, accumulating these gaps, and the post-COVID world, it's even more pronounced, where the gaps are going to be more wide as we go to back to school this year. You're going to have 5-6 months of learning loss. NWEA, who we're partnered with, you know, they just released a statement, a study that implies that your average student's probably going to lose about a year of learning if they don't keep learning on, say, Khan Academy or things like that. And you can imagine those kids in that bottom quartile, they might have already been 2-3 years behind, and now they're going to atrophy even more. So you're going to need even more mechanisms to manage that variation that exists in a given class or in a given grade level. So I think it's going to speak to these types of needs. And the very fact that the COVID crisis is making us say, hey, learning should not be bound by time and space. And the outcome matters much more than the path by which you achieve the outcome. And these are all ideas around mastery learning. The outcome is, have you mastered it or not? You know, I don't care if you're learning it in your parents' walk-in closet or a classroom or a library. Have you learned it or not? If you haven't learned it, keep working on it, or maybe move on, but you can go back and work on it a little bit better. So yeah, I do think, you know, one of the issues we've had historically with mastery learning is, you know, how does that work with traditional letter grades or seat time and all of these things? And some of these things, I think, in this COVID world, out of necessity, are being loosened, and things like credit recovery. And so it is interesting. We don't really know how it's all going to evolve, but if there is a silver lining here, it's, I hope that we can get the best of both worlds to work better with each other and become more mainstream. I mean, we've seen a lot of schools and districts and parents and teachers and students adopt these types of practices, but they're not mainstream yet, and this might make it more mainstream.
Yeah, really interesting. You know, one more question, and then we're going to open it up to the viewers, and that is, do you have any thoughts on whether it's sort of reasonable to expect young people who are going through trauma, you know, whether it's friends or relatives or people they know suffering, you know, medically in this crisis, to be keeping up with schoolwork? What kinds of messages do you? I know you do a daily sort of check-in. What kind of messages do you project around that?
Yeah, I think the number one message for everybody is take care of yourself first. You know, things like stress and anxiety, they creep up on you, and you know, you think you can handle it, and then it you know, before you know it, you're kind of like frozen. You're having an anxiety attack. You can't, you know, you can't act, and you don't want to get to a state like that. And that's for adults, and that's for students too. So obviously that mental health element trumps anything. I mean, you can learn how to factor a quadratic later, like that's true. I would say the other layer I would say is, if you can, try to put in 20, 30 minutes a day in at least math and reading, maybe writing as well, so that those muscles don't atrophy, because then it'll just be that much harder. But obviously it is kind of a hierarchy of needs. You got to take care of yourself, take care of your family first, and then I would say do those core things. And you know what you're describing, this has always been a question, and this has always been an issue, is that even before COVID, there's families where there's tough stuff going on. There's tough stuff going on at home. There's trauma in the neighborhood, and so this has always been an element. And once again, if there's a silver lining to COVID, I think we've all been guilty of not being as empathetic with other people. As you know, sometimes if you see people in a different context, part of your brain, you might say, oh, I have empathy. Part of your brain's like, well, maybe there were decisions made that, you know, got them there.
Sure.
But what COVID
Sure.
is that the decision was made for everyone. You know, when we have 20 million unemployed folks, it's not like they want to work, but the decision was made for them. And I think that's making everyone be more empathetic. Like, oh yeah, we do need to figure out how to support people, and we are all in this together. So yeah, people got to take care of themselves, their family, the community, and then figure out how they can progress on whatever, you know, their work or their academics.
Great. I think we're going to get some questions from the audience. Lori, are you there?
Yes, we
Somebody's
have.
voice.
Yes, we have some questions on equity issues. I'm hearing from teachers in my area, says Diane Schaffhauser with the THE Journal, that their schools aren't encouraging them to have real-time contact daily because their students don't have devices or internet access. Do you think that's a smart or short-sighted or a temporary approach that will evolve over time? Or what solutions are there?
It's a tough issue. I mean, you know, I definitely have a view on that. I think, yeah, you know, there's, you know, the school districts we've talked to, you know, we're very close to Clark County, which is the 5th largest school district. It's Las Vegas. They're one of our pilot districts that we've been working with, and so, you know, I've been intrigued talking to the superintendents. I mean, Greg, when you generously said that I'm the, you know, business person education, I'm like, no, you should talk to some of these superintendents. They're asking to answer harder questions than I am right now, and you know, they're seeing even 20, you know, some of these large urban school districts, they can't even find 20% of their kids. They just kind of, you know, as soon as school closed, they disappear to some degree, and they're trying to track them down. There's obviously school lunch programs they're trying to figure out, you know, feeding kids. There's so many things they're trying to figure out. And the digital divide's real in places like, you know, a lot of these places, 20, 30, 40% of kids won't have access. My general sense, though, is not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because what I view is, think about what happens if the district does not offer, you know, these types of things. Your and my kids, if we're in that district, we'll still figure out a way to get that for them. We'll you know, if need be, we could hire tutors for our kids or things like that. But a lot of other kids won't, and some of those kids have internet access. So it's not like, you know, there's a lot of kids from underserved families, you know, low income, who do have some form of internet access. Things like Khan Academy can be used on a smartphone, Zoom can be used on a smartphone, and so if you don't do anything, you're not leveling the playing field, because the haves will continue to move forward no matter what. I mean, if there was no public school system, it's not like no one would go to school. It's the people who could afford private schools would go to school, and no one else. That's why we have free public education. And so I think the model is in this time, I would try to do as much as possible with the tools available, be very conscientious of the equity issues. But then once you know, I would put the practices in place where, okay, for the kids who do have access, which is still hopefully 60, 70% of the district, a good chunk of those will be kids who need supports, whose families can't afford tutors, that they do have that contact with their teachers, and that they do get on Zoom and Google Hangouts and Skypes and things like that, and leverage Khan Academy, and that they're you know, there's incentives to use things like Khan Academy from their school. And then the school thinks about, now how do we reach the other 20, 30%? And we've seen Dr. Jesus Jara in Clark County do amazing things, partnering with the local telecom carrier, getting local corporations to get 40,000 laptops to the kids who need it, get training for parents. And so I think it's just what because it can't serve everyone to not do anything, I think I actually think that will drive more inequity. Let me put it that way, because the people who have resources will figure out ways to support their kids.
I guess it's interesting. Just to follow up on that question, and thank you for that question, by the way. I mean, will this crisis make that kind of equity disappear? That is, will connectivity and a good, solid device become not a nice to have, but a must have for everybody?
I hope so. I think that's what this is. The U.S. has done a good job with internet connectivity and computers in schools over the last roughly 10 years with E-rate. It's still not perfect. It's still not everywhere. But when I started on this Khan Academy journey, and especially when we started interfacing with schools back in 2009, 2010, it's a very different. We would have the same conversations at the school level back then, like, oh, our school only has one laptop cart and our broadband isn't really broadband. Now we're seeing most places, at least in semi-urban or urban areas, have that solved. Rural areas still have some issues, but now the conversation's at home. And I wrote an op-ed in Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago where it's almost exactly what this is no longer a nice to have; it's a must have, and not just from an education equity point of view, from a frankly economic equity point of view. That if you're looking for a job, if you want to just know what the weather is, if you want to know what's open or closed right now, you need some form of internet access. And so I'm hoping, these days we're talking about $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, and ways to stimulate the economy. That part of that is that we should just make it so that every person in the country has access to the internet, and like good access to the internet. And I don't think anyone will perceive that as somehow like you're coddling people or something like that. It should be a human right, and it'll drive economic growth, especially in times where people might have to be socially distanced or do remote work.
Yeah, great. Lori, what's the next question?
From Diane Schaffhauser. So what's your own school planning for the fall? What are you planning to do? And actually, I'm going to tack on to that. And what do you envision in the way school can transform, given this COVID environment has disrupted everything? Do you see online learning becoming a regular part of the school menu?
Yeah, I'll answer that on two different layers, on the Khan Academy layer, and then it sounds like the question might be relative to the school that I helped start. On the Khan Academy layer, we talked about the stuff we're trying to do for the next 5 months, roughly 4 or 5 months. As we go into back to school, kids are going to show up. They're going to have a huge variance in their preparedness for all the reasons we've talked about. And once you know where to start working on Khan Academy, you can learn at your own time and pace and progress well. But one issue we've always had, and we always knew we had to do, is in 12, let's focus on math, although obviously we have many other subjects, but math is where we're the most built out. You might be a 6th grade student and want to start on 6th grade, or your teacher might start you on 6th grade, but we know some of those students are actually operating at a 3rd grade level, or they kind of are at a 6th grade, but they have some gaps like we just talked about from 4th or 5th grade. So we've always known that we need to do some type of a diagnostic, some way to get students ramped up faster. That's something that we at Khan Academy are trying to accelerate for this back to school, some type of a lightweight, it could even be a questionnaire, and then kind of creating personalized remediation paths so that kids can quickly work on those Swiss cheese gaps that really matter, so they can get to grade level or beyond as quickly as possible. So that's the key thing we're doing at Khan Academy. The other things we're doing at Khan Academy, well, we're trying to make sure that the servers stay up with the traffic we're seeing. The other thing we're trying to do is we think everyone's going to need a very robust, let's call it, virtualization plan coming this fall. And everyone knows that intellectually, but people are still just putting out fires right now. And so we think we can play a role working with others to document what could a virtualization plan look like. And I don't think it's going to be one size fits all, but we are seeing school districts that are doing things like device access really well, or they're able to partner with corporations or philanthropists really well. Can we help document that and that's not Khan Academy's specialty. We don't sell devices or give internet access or any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But our role is, I guess, for lack of a word, thought leaders in that, Khan Academy, the experience is part of the solution, but you also have to think about how do you work with student information systems, rostering, how do you make sure teachers are trained, parents are trained on this, that they feel supported, and how do you get device access? So I'm hoping that over the next few months, we can create a very coherent view so that districts and governments can have a bit of a playbook around if this has to happen again. And I do think you're going to see more of a blend of online and physical, because as you go into this school year, teachers are going to have to realize that some of the kids might have to stay home because they have an elderly relative and they're afraid of spreading as long as the vaccine's not out yet. And so there are going to be ways that even if they're teaching normally, maybe they have a camera and it's Zoom accessible or something, and kids at home can access it. Ways to set more asynchronous goals, personalized learning plans on things like Khan Academy. And then if schools have to close, you can lean much heavier on those things without going through all of the trouble that's happening right now. What's happening at the KLS level, the Khan Lab School level, they're having the exact same conversation. We're having our board meeting later today, and it's the team has all about like, hey, how is learning not bound by time or space? It's obviously great if we can be in a room together, if we can give each other hugs and play and all of that, but that's actually leading to really powerful pedagogical conversations where it is about putting more agency on students, more independence on students, but also giving them the supports they truly need in order to develop that agency. So I'd like, at least where KLS has been going on this, is that this fluidity is making is kind of pushing the school in the right way, and I think it's going to have a similar effect broadly.
I have to say,
Thanks.
one of the things that I love about platforms like Khan Academy, and I'm not embarrassed to admit I've gone on Khan Academy here and there to find out about some, one topic or another.
So have I.
I love the idea of, and this is true, I think, of a lot of MOOCs as well, and this, no offense to you, Sal, but of being able to speed your voice up. Because there are some times when I don't need to hear it at the speed at which you presented it. I can hear a little bit more quickly and digest it. I think that's, I mean, obviously it's a technology not available to your typical student sitting in a classroom. But it's just kind of like a nice little piece of the puzzle that I think it's something we couldn't have done, 10 or 20 years ago. But I think I imagine there are lots of students for whom that's a huge help.
Yeah, and I'll take that as slight feedback that I should give faster responses. I'll talk faster. No, I watch.
I can listen to very fast talking. So
No, well, I do the same thing. In fact, when we talk about silver linings, of this, a lot of things, like when people make presentations at Khan Academy, like our coworkers, I say, hey, try to make it as a video, and then I can watch it at double speed. Not that I don't enjoy people at regular speed, but it's just sometimes more efficient. And I watch even some of my own videos at double speed if I need to refresh something. So I think there's a lot there. And then you can obviously pause, repeat, slow down when necessary. And there's no stigma if you don't embarrass something. People are like, wait, you still don't know that concept? Right. So yeah, I think there's something there's something valuable about that.
Yeah, great. Laurie, we got time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions.
Sure. The next one is from Susan Sawyers, who's a freelancer and is on the board of the Hechinger Report. In a COVID world, suggestions for recess, socialization for social and emotional learning. What kind of activities? Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks, Susan.
This is everyone's figuring this out. I'll tell you what I've seen. Look, if you are fortunate like myself, and we have a lot of adults in the house, we've been making sure. I actually think my youngest, I'm trying to teach him how to ride a bike, or my wife and I, and we're lucky to have a park 2 blocks away from our house. So we've been spending as much time as possible in the park, sometimes even working from the park, which is another privilege to have. There's that. I think, our children's school has done a great job where they call it outer wellness. They have inner wellness and outer wellness, which I think are nice. These aren't words that I coined, but they coined it, and I like it. It's inner wellness and outer wellness. Their outer wellness teacher has been doing really cool kind of dance parties on Zoom with the kids. It's a trip to see my 5-year-old, I mean, all of them, but especially the 5-year-old do his, his dance with his classmates. Yeah, so I think that type of thing is, so that's synchronous is better. There is something powerful about synchronous. Obviously, you could watch an aerobics video and dance along, but there's something cool to know that your friends are doing or your teachers are doing it with you. But on the asynchronous side, there's a lot of, in our schedules, one of our friends said, I knew Sal wrote part of the schedule because it said, do yoga with Adrian. I'm a fan of, there's this YouTube channel where she's very low key, it's a very approachable way to do yoga. I think that kind of stuff is great. I'm a big fan of meditation, which is more the inner wellness side. But these are all things. We've actually published some guided meditations for students. This was before COVID crisis. In fact, we need to do a few more that might be a little bit more COVID specific. But yeah, there's stuff to be done. Now that's, all with a major qualifier. If like I'm lucky, I have a backyard, I have a park nearby, I have internet access. If you don't have those things, it's I can only imagine. There's kind of the hotel room workouts that I've done sometimes when I'm on the road, type of thing. But the students might not. Kids need it bad. Frankly, we all need it badly. You don't realize how much your mood improves once you get a little bit of movement. But yeah, that's my best. My one advice I will say, and actually this is for students as well, but I'd say for all of us adults, is I've been trying to do as many of my Zoom calls walking. And then I don't even have to turn. I'll tell people, hey, I'm walking. You probably don't want to see the inside of my pocket or my chin, so I'm gonna turn the video off. That's given me a lot of energy and made me less felt closed up.
And that was actually another question that Susan had, which was about screen fatigue. This you just laid out one possible solution. Any other thoughts on? You must get this all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think it's well, there's something super about Zoom. I mean, it's cool. 30 years ago, this would seem like some kind of Star Trek reality that we can see each other and talk and have these conversations. But when there's a fact that it's on a screen, and there's a reality that you are in a strange way a little bit more self-conscious in this setting than you would be even if we were in the room together. There's something about a camera. I don't know. I'm not making up stuff, but I'm guessing that's where a little bit of Zoom fatigue comes from. I think a little bit of Zoom fatigue comes from, when you're in person, you recognize you have to walk from one place to another. You have to go to the restroom. You have to get a glass of water. And there's something about the Zoom that, no one knows what was happening right before or right after. And so you're kind of going back to back, and you almost feel bad saying, hey, I have to go to use the restroom or something like that. So I think we're going to build etiquette collectively where people are going to be a little bit more open, saying, hey, I just need a break here. And I think everyone's going to be understanding. I think that's one of the silver linings. Everyone's more empathetic of everyone right now. But I think, why does everything have to be Zoom? We've always had phone calls. I think there's something powerful about the phone call. Go on a walk. You can still talk to each other, and you're not staring at a screen. And then for younger people and even older, us, all screen time isn't equal. There's creative, productive screen time, and then there's less valuable screen time. I do this thing on Sunday mornings with close friends and family where, my family had historically not gone to things like church or the mosque or the synagogue, but I was like, well, there's some really powerful things about that, about a sense of community, about being able to discuss how we can become better people. So even pre-COVID, we were meeting in the park and just having conversations about how do we deal with our insecurities or how to get better at dealing with conflict, and we do some meditation. And we've transitioned that to Zoom over the last few weeks, and it's been really cool. It's been in some ways, it's been filling our souls as opposed to emptying it. Screen time sometimes does. So, we're all figuring out this stuff together.
Sort of like a Zoom salon, if you will.
Yeah, and that stuff has been really nice. Everyone's connecting with friends and family that frankly they should have been connecting with all along, and now they realize they can over Zoom.
Let's try to get one more question in, and then let Sal get on with his day.
From Michael Iescas of KFF, can you please say more about the plethora of online resources that have flooded the market during this crisis? What can families do to navigate these waters? And can you point to some exemplars besides Khan Academy?
Yeah, I would say, you only need 2 or 3 that are kind of your go-to to keep your kids learning. And once again, it's the math, the reading, and the writing. Like if your kids are learning there, you're doing great as a parent or as an educator or as a student if you're trying to do it for yourself. Obviously, Khan Academy is one. Khan Academy Kids, not as many people know about it, but it just added first grade. It just added teacher functionality. I highly recommend folks to take a look at that. And that's actually reading, writing, math, social emotional learning, things like logic. It covers the Head Start and the Common Core standards all the way through kindergarten and first grade. So highly recommend that. I think there's, we have English and language arts. There's tools like Lexia, which I think are good. There's for English and language arts. As you get into, that's still younger age groups. As you get into middle school, high school, obviously we have a lot. We have things like I've even told folks, we have a lot in math and science, and we're starting to have more in the humanities at the middle and high school level. But for students who are ready, say even ninth graders, things like test prep often have kind of a very kind of practical aspect to them. But what we've designed with the College Board around the SAT practice, it's reading, math, it's reading, writing, and math, and you can actually get feedback on your writing for as much as feedback as you want. And it's actually just great practice to get more and more college ready and to fine tune those skills, with the side effect that is you'll probably do quite well on the SAT if you keep practicing there. I think as kids start to, and so I think these types of things, there could be 4 or 5 resources that can be your core, and then even less than that, there could be 2 or 3 that are truly your core. And some of them they don't have to be technology. It could just be a reading list, and you discuss it with your kids, or journaling every night. I mean, I could imagine a world where you read, you have your reading list, you talk about it with your parents, you journal every night, and you do your 30 minutes or 40 minutes of Khan Academy every day. That's pretty good. You're going to keep learning. And then if your child is interested in coding, there's a ton of resources. Khan Academy has stuff. There's code.org. There's other things. There's Scratch. If your child is interested in the arts and filmmaking, it doesn't have to be an online resource. It could just be, there's great tools to start editing your own films and stuff like that. There's just, once you get on the enrichment side, that's where you get this blow up of resources. But there's a lot of amazing stuff out there.
Great. And before I let you go, I just want to ask you, one of the sort of the interesting pieces of your origin story, at least Khan Academies, is the idea that you started to remotely sort of tutor some young family members. Your niece was very young at the time, correct? And obviously she's not as young anymore. Can you tell me a little bit about what she's up to, what she's doing?
Yeah, no, it was my cousin Nadia. When I started, I was younger then too. I think I was 28 and she was 12.
We were all younger.
I was 28 and she was 12 or 13 when we started.
Okay.
And then I started, tutoring her younger brothers, and word got around my family that free tutoring was going on, and I started tutoring 10, 15, mostly cousins, a few family friends.
Okay.
And I had a few friends who were actually volunteering with me. But yeah, that was the genesis of Khan Academy. Nadia today, she's in New York. She's actually in a PhD program for clinical psychology. She's let's see if I do the math right, she's 28 years old, 29 years old now. Okay. But yeah, no, we're still in touch, and she's doing well. And and her 2 younger brothers, who are kind of students number 2 and 3 of Khan Academy. I actually think they're all in Brooklyn, and you can imagine with the stay in place orders and all of it, but they're all together with each other. So we actually have Zoom sessions with them every couple of days just to stay connected.
Nice. Well, it's a good reminder that even though you're focused very much on the present, stuff happens fast, and young people grow up, and they're going to remember this time for sure. Sal, thank you so much for sticking with us for an entire hour here, and really kind of digging deep into some of these issues. Thanks to all the folks who sent in questions, and for everybody who listened. This is just one in a series of EWA sessions. And I'm going to kick it back to Lori to say goodbye.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Greg and Sal, for of this wonderful discussion. And I want to thank you folks for all your terrific questions. I'm really sorry we haven't gotten to all of them. As the webinar closes, you'll see an evaluation survey. Please complete it. Your feedback is important and helps us improve. And be sure to visit ewa.org to sign up for yet more online seminars. Thanks and have a great day.
Great. Thanks again. You guys have a great one.